Okay, so let's begin. I want to talk about the din of yomtovsheni galuyot. We have the Gemara in Masachet Beitzah on Daf Daled Amud Bet, where the Gemara says that now that we know, now that we know the correct date nowadays, my tama of dinan treyome. Why do we still hold Yom Tov Sheni Galuyot? Why do we do 2 days of Yom Tov? Mishum deshalchu mitam hizaharu b'minhag avotechem biyedchem zimnin de gazru malchut gzeira va'ati li'ikalkule. Despite the fact that we know b'kviya diyarcha, we're aware of the date, b'chol zot we continue, and Chazal said to continue the minhag, hizaru b'minhag avotechem biyedechem, because things can go back to not knowing. I'll just add parenthetically, when my father, alav shalom, was in hiding in Poland during the Shoah, he did not have a luach. And the two things that he wanted to avoid was eating chametz on Pesach and eating on Yom Kippur. But he was good at figuring out luach, so he figured it out by himself according to the klalim that he remembered. And when he got out, when he was liberated, he got a hold of a luach and he saw that he was right. So although when you look at this Gemara and you say, Zimnin de Gazu Malchut Gzeirava Atil Kule, that then now we're going to forget the date. So anyway, whenever I see this, I remember that, and it hits very close to home. So in any case, there's a halacha that we have to continue the minhag. Okay. Now, so once we have the minhag of yomtovsheni shel galuyot in the galut, and in Eretz Yisrael there is no din. We'll see that we're not noheg yomtovsheni shel galuyot. So the question, of course, arises: what happens if you have people going from one place to another? What custom do they follow? Okay, because someone in Chutz La'aretz has a custom of 2 days, Eretz Yisrael has a custom of 1 day. So if a person is moving back and forth, what happens? Now, this is the question which the Gemara in Psachim deals with. Now, first we have to understand for a moment the general principles. There are many minhagim, which some places they're noheg one way and some places noheg another way. And what happens if a person goes from one place to another? Okay, so that's the Mishnah in Psachim on Daf Nun Amud Aleph. Makom shenagu la'asot melacha ba'arvei Psachim. Right, so there was a minhag some places not to do malacha on Erev Pesach. Okay, some people are machmir not to do malacha the whole year round, but there was makom shenagu la'asot melacha ba'arvei Psachim ad chatzot osim. Makom shenahagu shelo la'asot ein osim. Right, where the minhag is to do malacha, then you can do malacha. The minhag is that you don't do malacha, then you don't do malacha. Okay? Haolech mi makom she'osim l'makom she'ein osim. Right, if you go from a place that they do malacha to a place that they don't do malacha, o mi makom she'ein osim l'makom she'osim, or vice versa, notnin alav chumrei makom she'yatza misham v'chumrei makom she'halach l'sham. So you have to go l'chumra according to where you came from and according to where you are. Right, so Gemara clarifies this on Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. Gemara says as follows. Gemara has the following case. Ki ata Rabbi Bar Chana achal da'aitera. Rabbi Bar Chana was from Eretz Yisrael, and in Eretz Yisrael they had a minhag to eat a certain fat from an animal, which in Bavel the minhag, the custom was not to eat because it was similar to chaylev, which is asur to eat. So someone came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, and he was eating something that in Bavel they were noheg not to eat. So came in the chazinu kas yaminayu. When he saw people from Bavel coming, he covered the food so they shouldn't see that he's eating something which their minhag forbids. Okay? Atu va'amru leila Abaye. So the people came to Abaye and they said, you know that Rabbi Ravchana was eating this with this chaylev, and when we came near, he covered it. Now the Gemara previously says you only have to do that if the person that you're hiding it from is a kuti. He's not really shomer Torah mitzvot authentically, so they can misunderstand what's going on, right? But for someone who knows, you don't have to hide it. Okay. So Amar leila Abaye, Amar lahu shavinu kikutai. He treated you as if you were kutim. Okay. Then Rabbi Bar Achana let lehadetnan. The Gemara asks, Rabbi Bar Achana doesn't hold that notnin alav chumrei hamakom sheyatzam misham v'chumrei hamakom shalach l'sham. He doesn't know that when you come to some place and they're machmir, that you have to be machmir too. So for that, the Gemara gives two terutzim. The second teretz is what's relevant for us. Rav Ashi Amar afilu teimim Eretz Yisrael Bavel, even it came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. Hani mili heicha de'ein dato lachzor. When do you have to be machmir according to the place where you arrived? That's if you have no intention to return, right? The Rabba Bar Bar Chana dato lachzor hava. But Rabbi Bar Chana's intention was to return to Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, he was not bound, even though he was physically in Bavel, but he was not bound by the chumrot of the minhagim of Bavel. He could still hold the kula of Eretz Yisrael, even though he was in Bavel, because of da'ato lachzor. Right? And that means basically he's a ben Eretz Yisrael. He happens to be in Chutz La'aretz. But what determines the minhag is to which community do you belong. So people from communities travel to other communities. But if I intend to return to Eretz Yisrael, or if I intend to return to Bavel, I still belong to that community. Okay? So that's the general rule by minhagim. Right? That dato lachzor, intention, determines what community you belong to. Okay? Okay. Now let's see how this may play itself out with regards to yomtovsheni galuyot. And here we have the Gemara on Nun Aleph Amud Bet, and this was on the sheet that I gave you. Okay? The Gemara says as follows. Let's see. Amalei Rav Safra. Rav Safra said, L'Rabbi Abba, Kigon anan diyadina b'kviya diyarcha. Take me, for example, that I know the correct date. B'yishuv lo avidna mipnei shinui hamachloket. B'midbar mai. So, for example, me, I who know the correct date, in areas which are settled, I'm being ambiguous on purpose because it's a machloket how to interpret this Gemara. So I'm trying to say it in a way which will cover all the bases. I know the kviyut, the correct kviyut. So for me, in the yishuv, where Jews live, lo avidna, I don't do it. Okay? Mipnei shinui machloket, because it could cause discord. Okay? If I act differently than my surroundings. B'midbar mai, what about in the desert where there's no yishuv? Amar le, so he answered him, Hachi amarav ami, b'yishuv asur, where there's a settlement, it's asur, because you can't create a machloket. B'midbar mutar, but where there is no settlement, it's permissible. Okay? What's the case here? Where was Rav Safra? Where was he going? Okay. So that is a machloket rishonim. We have to look at it very carefully here. Let's start with Rashi. Okay. Rashi says, B'yishuv lo avidna. What is lo avidna? I didn't do it. Didn't do what? Malacha. Right? So that means the yishuv is a place where they held Yom Tovsheni. Okay? And he was going to this place where they held Yom Tovsheni, right? Where he himself didn't hold Yom Tovsheni. Okay? So this is basically a ben Eretz Yisrael that goes to Chutz La'aretz. Okay? B'yishuv lo avidna, malacha b'yom tovsheni, ho'il v'nahagu bo isur, since they have the custom that it's forbidden to do malacha, lo ashaneh le'eineihem et minhag. I will not act differently in their presence. Okay? But in the midbar, right? Rashi doesn't say anything more than this, right? But in the midbar, so there is no one around. So there I can hold one day, even though I'm in Chutz La'aretz. Okay? So what we're talking about in this Gemara, according to Rashi, and it's more explicit in Tosfot, we're talking about a ben Eretz Yisrael shahalach l'Chutz La'aretz. Okay? And the question is, when I get to a Jewish community in Chutz La'aretz, right? Of course I can't hold one day. Okay? But what about if I'm in Chutz La'aretz, but I haven't arrived at a community yet? I'm in the airport. Right? I arrived in the airport on yomtovsheni shegaluyot. Right? So that halach l'maisa, that has halach of a midbar. I was in that situation. I had to fly on yomtovsheni, and I arrived in Kennedy Airport. It was 3:00 in the afternoon. Simchas Torah. Out there, it was Simchas Torah. And in the airport, we had a whole bunch of people. We had a regular minyan for mincha. And we just waited until it was almost dark. And I arrived where I arrived after Yontif. Right? Got into a cab. It was still Yontif, but I got into a cab. But by the time I arrived where I needed to go, it was ready after Yontif. Right? So that's the midbar. Okay, so that's based on this. That's halach l'maisa. That's the midbar. Okay, Tosfot says this explicitly. Kagon ana di adina bekviya di yarcha. I think I have it on the sheet, right? Do I have that Tosfot? Let me see. 1 second. Or I just told you to see it. I just cited it, right? Okay. Kagon ana di adina bekviya di yarcha. Mefarish Rabbeinu Tam. Shahaya b'makom sheshluchei beitin magi'im. He was from a place where the messengers of Beit Din came. In other words, there was no Sfeik of Diyoma there. Basically, it means Eretz Yisrael. V'sham ein osim ele yom echad. V'hainu b'kviya diyarcha she'aya yodea matay nikba chodesh. Dahatam leka lemigzar shem yaseh melacha b'yom tov sheshomim kiddush hachodesh. Okay? So, Tosfot says explicitly that Rav Safra is basically in Eretz Yisrael, and he's going to Chutz La'aretz, right? B'yishuv lo avdinan, Tosfot continues, afilu bitzin'ah, right? The yishuv, meaning the yishuv of Chutz La'aretz, we don't do malacha, even if nobody sees. Afilu, now he answers, afilu dato lachzor. If it wasn't dato lachzor, then he's chayav in yomtovsheni shegaluyot, because now he's a ben Chutz La'aretz. Ben Eretz Yisrael that goes to Chutz La'aretz, who's yorei to Chutz La'aretz, so he becomes a ben Chutz La'aretz. So we're not talking about that. He wanted to know, what if dati lachzor? Okay, so even though dato lachzor, it's also for him to do malacha, afilu bitzin'ah. Okay, va'afilu dato lachzor, delo efshalom lacha bitzin'ah kamo shar dvar. And the reason even bitzin'ah is forbidden is because it's very difficult to do malacha b'tzin'ah. People will hear the noise, people will see the fire,